we're working in the world and we're doing some mental modifications of how we think about other people. And I find a lot of my work is really mental modifications to train myself. Because in Bhakti, we train ourselves not just to see me and God or me and Source or me and Krishna. We
Hmm.
train ourselves to see Krishna or God in every living being.
Hmm.
See, in my material mind sees that
Me and
I
mine.
like, yeah, me, God, and these are some of my friends, and I like Kat. She's pretty cool because she's sort of like me. But there's this person over there. There's Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I hate them or hate one of them. And then there's the other people. I hate them. And
Mm.
then there's people. These people are sort of cool. And there's my friend from high school. I like him. But there's that jerk from high school. I hate her. So it's like we have a world of friends and enemies.
Hmm.
The Bhagavad Gita says that's got to end. That concept has to end. You have to learn to see divinity in every living being. It's no longer the metric for your spirituality to say, it's me and God and screw the world. A
Mm.
better metric for our spirituality is, can I see God in every person and every situation that God puts me in?
Hmm.
That's a better way to measure how spiritually connected I am. Can I be God conscious with a person that's driving me insane? Can I see some good in them? Can
Hmm.
I see something divine in them?
Hi, and welcome to the Soul Awakening podcast. I'm your host, Kat Fowler, and I'm so excited to bring this episode to you today. We talk so much about the deeper spiritual aspects of yoga, not just the physical, go to a workout, asana, sculpt, whatever yoga class, but like the deeper aspects of yoga. We kind of just barely scratched the surface on it, but I do think it's a really beautiful conversation, just to open people up to the different avenues that the soul can take in this journey that we're on towards enlightenment, towards meeting the God within. And my guest today is so perfect for that. So, Raghunath, I've actually known for a while. We'll share about that on the show, which you'll hear in just a moment. But I will read his bio just so you get an idea of who he is. I call him Raghunath. He's also known as Ray Capo, because he does many things. He wears many hats. So, as a teen in the 80s, Ray Cappo founded the hardcore punk band Youth of Today, which championed the principles of clean living, vegetarianism, and self control. After experiencing a spiritual awakening in India, he formed a new band, Shelter, devoted to spreading a message of hope through spiritual connection. Ray currently leads yoga retreats, trainings, and kirtans at his Super Soul Farm Retreat Center in upstate New York, as well as annual pilgrimages to India. He's the co founder and co host of Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast that has been ranked #1 on Apple for podcasts about spirituality. So I'm so excited to bring this conversation to you. The beginning of it, we're kind of just catching up and just sharing a little bit about his background, his journey, his spiritual awakening, how he got to become a monk, how his journey brought him throughout New York City and the world and India while he was searching for methods to really dive deep within. And then the second half of the conversation is really all about the deep aspects of yoga philosophy, devotional yoga, bhakti yoga, the Bhagavad Gita, and hopefully the closed captions translate all of this properly. I think they will. But these are some sacred texts that have been around for longer than you can imagine, and they are transformational in your daily life. So hopefully, some of the things we shared and that Raghunath touches on will help you in your spiritual journey and maybe spark a little bit of a desire to go deeper into the aspects of yoga on your personal journey. So sit back and enjoy the episode, and I will see you at the end of the show. All right. Hello, Raghunath. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I'm super excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. Glad to reconnect after a
Many,
decade.
many years.
Yeah, it feels
Yeah,
like over a decade.
literally. I can actually tell you how we met, and it was actually kind of a funny story.
Did
So
we
I was,
meet? Did we meet in Huntington or something, Long Island?
we met in Long Island, we met in Long Beach, and I was teaching yoga in Long Island at the time, and Amanda was hosting a yoga conference. And so I was one of the Long Island teachers, and you came
Oh,
in with
yeah.
Miles. She was your assistant. And you taught a workshop there. And I think that's how we met. And then all the teachers got dinner after. And I remember taking your class and loving your kirtan and being like, oh my God, is kirtan so good?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. And that was 2011 or so.
I had my two little kids with me on that.
I don't fully remember. I don't think
Was
at
that
dinner
was
because
that on like the shore or something on the beach?
that was in like a really nice hotel called the
Yeah, my
Allegria.
two little kids were with me
Oh, that's
somehow.
too
Now
funny.
they're big. Now they're 20 and 18, but
See, this is crazy. It's been like
oh man,
literally
yeah, it is
decades.
close.
Yeah, and then I remember we both taught at Pure Yoga and or did you did teach at Pure Yoga, right? You would come in
Yeah, I
occasionally.
taught at Pure.
Yeah,
No, I
same.
had a regular class. I had a few regular classes there.
Same. Mine was at Pure East and then I had one at Pure West, but I had two
Me
or three
too.
at
Me
Pure
too.
East.
Me too.
That's so
Mainly
funny.
at Pure. Actually, wait, which side is west? I was on Pure East, and then when
Same.
they opened Pure West, I started teaching there too.
You were there before me, but I think you were kind of like you just had one class when I was starting to teach there. So I would take your class occasionally, and loved it. I just remember my arms would be crazy sore by the end of every class of yours because it was all like arm balance inversions and whatnot, which was great. And so, yeah, that's how we know each other for such a long time. But funny story, when I knew you, I just knew you as Raghunath, like as a yoga teacher. I didn't realize you were a monk beforehand. I didn't know you had a band that was pretty famous and it was a punk rock band. And then once I, figured all that out,
Surprise!
well, it makes perfect sense, right? With like
Well,
how you
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I never like broadcasted it.
No, no.
When I taught in LA, I never told anyone. And then
Hmm.
in New York, every now and then, and in sort of my demographic in LA was a lot of like I say older ladies, they're my age now, like ladies in their 40s and the 50s from Beverly Hills. So no one ever really. And then, but once I started teaching in New York, and I developed a lot of athletes and advanced yoga practitioners came to class.
Hmm.
Every now and then, some people are like, "Wait a second, I know you. I used to listen to your band when I was 20 years old."
Crazy.
So that happened a lot, and there was like a little bit of a crossover. But I sort of like kept those two worlds sort of separate. And
Hmm.
it wasn't sort of like towards the end that I just said, why am I like compartmentalizing my life like that? So some
Hmm.
people like yourself never found out until later.
No, I did not really until social media. And then you would start posting stuff on social media and I was like, "What?" And then I was like, "Oh, this makes perfect sense." Because like, your classes like the kirtan was so good. Hare Krishna kirtans are like the best. And then on top of that, you were a musician, are a musician. So
Yeah,
you added all of that. So I was like, "Okay, now I get it. Now I understand."
the puzzle
Um,
comes together.
it does. It does. So can you share a little bit about your journey from being a musician to becoming a yoga practitioner, your spiritual awakening, really, how you found yoga in general, and then also how you ended up going to India and becoming a monk?
Yeah, it's if you're familiar with New York City in the 80s, especially the early 80s, it was sort of like the Wild West in especially downtown. What to
Hmm.
speak of the East Village. The East Village, the Lower East Side was a little lawless. It's sort of like the cops were like it was those Serpico times of the cops where the cops were bad, the criminals were bad,
Mm-hmm.
the neighborhood had gangs and the punks went there because the rents were so cheap because no one wanted to live there. And it was sort of like a tough neighborhood, but it was also a neighborhood where art blossomed. There
Hmm.
was a lot of at the time, if you were growing up where I grew up in Connecticut or anywhere in suburban Long Island, everything was sort of commercial rock, arena rock. Everything was sort of what's it called? Monocropped
Hmm.
culture.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I wanted to be something different and sort of find myself. And when you went to the Lower East Side, it was filled with, street art, graffiti, hip hop, alternative types of music, not just punk or hardcore, but like goth or noise or death metal, or it was just like it was sort of like where everybody could proudly fly their freak flag and feel sort of welcome and not judged.
Hmm.
And I feel like all the things that people are struggling with, like accepting people for as they are, we dealt with that when then we were 17 years old, because we
Hmm.
were all sort of not accepted. So
Yeah.
we all went to a place like a crazy little island, which was the Lower East Side. And I think every major city had their little pocket where all the freaks could go, and you could be bound together by freakdom.
Yeah.
And so with that freakdom was alternative ideas on diet. So I got really into health food and fasting and juicing. I got really into um, alternative spiritual paths too. I got interested in Eastern thought, Eastern or metaphysics, Christ consciousness, Buddhism, the Bhagavad Gita. I got really into music, all these things it was sort of a haven for alternative things. So
Hmm.
as I became more and more established my band, Youth of Today, we were a band that just, punk was supposed to be about doing what you believe, and it was supposed to be about rebelling from the norm. So for me, I was always into healthy living. And so that to me seemed like a biggest rebellion, and it seemed like a positive thing. And I was a pretty positive person. And I saw a lot of teenagers like myself moving to the Lower East Side and living on the streets or living in abandoned buildings and just like getting caught up in the drugs of their choices.
Mm.
And it was an ugly thing. And to me, it didn't seem like an alternative. It seemed like
Hmm.
people are just taking like dark, depressing life and taking it to the next level of darkness. And so, Youth of Today, my band rallied. The music was very loud, very abrasive, but the message was always very positive. And
Hmm.
we were into clean living. We were vegetarians, and we were didn't drink or smoke. And so that was sort of our message. And it was as radical as punk was, and it was sort of our message, but it became very, very popular very, very quickly,
Hmm.
and it spread internationally. And yeah, and so that led me to a threshold. Not that I didn't feel like, okay, I don't drink, I don't smoke. This is this now I'm at this high point, and I'm above here. You guys are all a mess. You guys are rock bottom. To me, because I was diving into all these spiritual books and spiritual literature, I felt like, okay, just controlling what you put in your mouth is very, very important. Controlling what
Hmm.
you are, what you eat. Try to keep your mind under control. Trying to keep your body under control. Trying to keep your senses under control. That makes sense.
Hmm.
But I felt like, okay, this is a threshold for something deeper. And as I'm reading books by, on, metaphysics and paranormal things and spirituality, I thought, actually, there's more stuff than this.
Hmm.
This is just the introduction. It's the threshold or the doorway to a greater house. And so that
Hmm.
led me to, truthfully, before yoga, I got into Ayurveda. And
Oh.
there was very little books on Ayurveda then. So I just started
Hmm.
taking a course on it. I met an Ayurvedic teacher, and he happened to be into Eastern spirituality, Bhagavad Gita, and he turned me on to the Bhagavad Gita. I really didn't get like when you and I practiced yoga together. Taught a very strong asana class, but
Yeah.
my first reason why I got into yoga was not to do contortionism or handstands or even physical fitness.
Hmm.
It was try to understand the spiritual underpinnings of the yoga system. And so, at a vegetarian work restaurant that I worked at in the Lower East Side, a young lady I started dating turned me on to yoga too. And I was like, I always wanted to go to yoga because I studied this Ayurveda and I feel like the yogis have some information that I want. And
Hmm.
she said, oh, you're going to love this teacher. And so I went to Dharma Mitra, and Dharma Mitra had
The best.
his place on the lower west side. I think it was like West 3rd or West 4th Street. And that's where I started doing yoga there. And he also recommended the Bhagavad Gita for me to read.
Wow.
And but there were a lot of Bhagavad Gitas around out then. So he had the Prabhupada Bhagavad Gita on his
Hmm.
shelf. And I said, well, what do you think about this one, the Hare Krishna one? Do you like this one? He said, this is a very, very good one. So I said, okay, I'm going to read that one. And so then through so many different circumstances, there happened to be, and that's, I think, when you're sort of ripen yourself up for a spiritual pursuit,
Hmm.
so many doors just start to magically open. And
Yeah.
sure enough, there was like a little Krishna center right around the corner from my house on Greenwich Avenue. I lived in West 15th Street. Less than 2 blocks away was Integral Yoga, and then right next down the road was where I got all my health food from, and that's where I started also doing yoga at Integral Yoga.
Hmm.
And then there was a little Krishna center where I used to take prasad, do kirtan, read the Bhagavad Gita. Then there was another Shivananda place around the corner from that, and I was just like, "This is weird. This stuff is like all this interesting stuff is like following me."
Hmm.
And that stuff builds, and you hear these stories of saints and sages and mystics saying, you know what, there is a pleasure of this world, but it's like a drop in the ocean. There's greater pleasures underneath all this stuff, and that's what really became the sort of the springboard for me to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And the more I was having success in my material life with my band, the more I realized like there's actually nothing here for me. I mean, I can get bigger, but I haven't really changed so much. I haven't changed as a being. I might have
Hmm.
even become a better songwriter or become a better public speaker or something like that. But the substance of who I am is not growing. I felt like it was almost like certain plants you have to put in the sun. I felt like there was a
Hmm.
limit of where I was going.
Hmm.
And so and then there was a tragedy within my family. My father left his body untimely, and at that point I said, you know what, I need to quit this band and I need to find myself. And we had a big scene and a big bunch of friends, and me and the guys in the band were all best friends. And I just said,
Hmm.
I can't do this anymore, and I just quit at the height of it.
Wow.
And yeah, it was great. I got rid of everything and bought a one-way ticket to India.
Seriously?
Yeah,
You didn't
in
know,
19.
did you know where you were going? Did you just,
I had a couple ideas,
uh-huh.
but it was weird. You'd have to write a letter. You have to write an airmail back then. Hopefully,
Hmm.
you get a reply from your airmail. You get an address through a book. You meet a person who's been there, stuff like that. It was before
Hmm.
internet. It was before cellular telephones. Smart, what to speak of smartphones. It was before satellite TV. It was before computers, and it was like traveling to a whole nother world. And there, even the village I went to, there was one phone in the village, which was, it's hard to even believe. There was no TV in the village. I think
Oh, crazy.
sometimes you'd see a TV, and the TV had like two channels, and a
Hmm.
bunch of people would be around the TV. But
Hmm.
I don't think like satellite TV hit India till 1992 or something.
Wow.
So it was almost like you were in a whole secret world.
India is a different world. It literally,
India is a different world. Even if you go today, it's sort of a different world. But
it
in the
is.
last 10 years, I've seen it really rapidly develop, like
Hmm.
super
Hmm.
rapidly.
Hmm.
Like Delhi, it's almost like they dropped a California mall right on top of, right on top of New Delhi.
Hmm. So what year round was that when you went to India, and where did you go, and how did you end up finding your guru and the right ashrams and really get onto the spiritual path? And then ultimately, is that when you decided to be a monk and just you did not return for many years?
Good question. So, I ended up, anyway, all this is in my book. If you read my book, Punk to Monk, it just came out not that long ago, but it tells my whole sort of journey. And then,
We'll get the
anyway,
abbreviated version. Yeah.
yeah, this is sort of like the Cliff Notes right here. But what happened was, I went to the Hare Krishna ashram in Vrindavan,
Mm-hmm.
and because I resonated deeply with the few Krishna. I met a couple Krishna guys in New York that really touched my heart, and I said, you know what, I want to go to their ashram and check it out. And then I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the kirtan. I fell in love with the music, their morning program, the morning rituals, the simple living, and I really fell in love with a lot of the monks that lived there. And I thought, like, these guys have nothing, and they're so happy. How are they so happy? And some of them were Indians, and like Indians, especially back then, there was almost like no middle class. So some of them were poor, and so I thought, well, the poor Indians maybe, and this is true in India and Nepal, maybe moving to an ashram is an economic step up because a
Mm,
lot of people in India like have no flushing, there's
right,
no
right,
there was no sewage, so there was
right,
no so you get 3 meals a day. A matter of fact, poor people sometimes would give their children to an ashram to be
right,
raised
right, right.
because it's an economic step up. But I was finding like Germans, and I was finding Americans, and I was finding people from Sweden, like these very affluent country
Mhm.
coming and living in this ashram. And I'm thinking, man, Switzerland, I mean, this is a rich country. German, this is a rich country. United States, these are rich. These people are
Mhm.
from rich families, and they're sleeping on the floor. They're living with nothing. They have no clothes. They go to bed early.
Mhm.
They're incredibly strict. Why are they so happy? And I started becoming frustrated, thinking, what? It's like it was like a complete paradigm shift. How can you be happy with absolutely nothing?
Mhm.
And then I started realizing, like, wow, if I could crack this code,
Mhm.
that could that would be like one of the mysteries of the world to unlock.
Mhm.
And so at that moment, it developed. I've met a lot of like cool people, and I met a lot of traveled to cool places, but it was seeing the smiles on the face of those renounced monks who really had very very little and lived very simply. That I said, that's what I want. I don't really have much to offer them,
Mhm.
but I have a lot to learn from them.
Mhm.
So I stayed in India for only about 4 months, and I felt, because I mean I walked literally away from a big following
Mhm.
of like fans and friends and scene and family. And my
Mhm.
my father had just left this world, and I
Mhm.
felt like I had to have some closure with my mother, but I didn't want to not be a monk anymore. I wanted to figure out how I could stay a monk. So I just followed the principles. I was celibate. I would meditate for 2 hours a day.
Mhm.
When I would cook, wouldn't eat at restaurants. So, we only cook our own food. So I
Mhm.
followed all like those strictures of being a monk. Um, you know, and but when I came back, I felt like I needed some closure with my band, and I told my
Mhm.
band, like, I can't do this anymore. I'm writing my final record, and so I wrote a shelter record. It was sort of like that was the name of this sort of final musical offering I was going to make to the world,
Mhm.
and it was like sort of a goodbye for all my fans.
Mhm.
Um, the band said, "Oh, that's okay, man. That's okay. But you know what? We just got offered to go to Europe on tour. Let's go to Europe. Just one more tour, please." And no one's been to Europe yet. Let's do it. And I was like 19 years old. They were like younger than me. Our drummer was 15 years old. It was
Wow.
like, I know, we were just a bunch of kids. And I never went to Europe too. So part of me was like, I did have like material desires to like, maybe we
Mhm.
should just do Europe and then figure it out. But I
Yeah.
said, all right, but I'm going to still like live like a monk. You know what I mean? You got to
Mhm.
deal with me as a monk on this tour. So we did that tour, and a lot of interesting adventures. I also write about that in my book. And then I got back and I moved to a Krishna farm in Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
lived there for a while. And then at a certain point, maybe a year and a half later, um, the more I studied the Bhagavad Gita, the more I realized that the Gita doesn't teach to give up what you're good at.
Mhm.
It teaches to spiritualize what you're good at.
Yes.
So if you're a leader and you're leading people, I didn't do that. I don't know how
I
that happened.
Krishna did
Krishna did it. Krishna gave it a thumbs up.
it.
But if you suppose you're a leader by nature, or suppose you're a podcaster by nature, there's a lot of podcasts where you could have just talk about degrading things or true
Right.
crime or things like that that just like
Right.
entangle people's mind, darken their consciousness.
Mhm.
So the Bhagavad Gita would say, well, you could do that,
Mhm.
or you could take that same charisma that you have, that same public appearance that you have, that same voice that you have, that same platform that you have, and just spiritualize it. Add a twist of spirit to it, and that's exactly what you do. I feel,
Oh,
you
thank you.
know. Yeah, and that's what I do too, and that's what I felt like. So I was
Absolutely.
a communicator, I was a front man, I was a speaker, a public speaker, I was a songwriter, I was like a poet of sorts. I said,
Mhm.
I'm just going to do the same thing for Krishna as an offering to God,
Mhm.
and I'm going to spiritualize the same music. And so I did it. I previously had a record label. I started another record label while
Wow.
living as a monk. I found a bunch of other monks that were musicians. I put a band together.
Wow.
And this band was called Shelter, and this band got bigger, exponentially bigger than the first band. And so
Wow.
we ended up having a hit record in Brazil. We put out our own records. And so that first record turned out not to be my, swan song. It began another series of records
Mhm.
of a band. And so anyway, that was the peculiar transition. And then I would just, and our whole band lived in an ashram. We
Wow.
built a studio in the ashram. And yeah, you can read the rest of the story in my book. It's a pretty interesting story. And then we traveled to India every year just to sort of get into that consciousness of even though we were living in an ashram, there's something about being in a holy land where you're not listening to music. You're not
Yes.
doing anything except doing things that monks do: go on pilgrimage, go to holy places, go to holy rivers, hear from holy people, study, etc.
Right.
It was a very, very unique time of my life, but perhaps a unique time in the history of people practicing Eastern thought and Eastern lifestyle, but
Hmm.
um, having this connection to not just the material world, but to a weird facet of the material world. You know,
It's just too funny. Well, because my journey with yoga was similar. I mean, I practiced in when I was in college in New Jersey for a few years, and then when I went on this quest, like I really want to find my teacher, that's when I ended up meeting Dharma Mitra at a
mm,
global mala. He was teaching one of the teachers teaching the 108 sun salutations, and then when we locked eyes, he gave me, like a little prayer, and I just started crying, and I was like, "What's happening? Who
some
is
like
this man?"
reconnection. Now, you
Yeah.
were also from a spiritual family. Your parents
I
were
am.
yogis, right?
Yes. They're kind of like you. They met in an ashram in New York City, but in the 70s. And it was around the Upper West Side. And my mom was a dancer at Juilliard at the time. And then that's where she met my dad. And that was, I think, it was in the 70s. I'm not sure the exact year. And so yeah, so they met like that. Then they had a satellite ashram that they lived in for many years, kind of like you in Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
And so then that's why I was raised almost like this, I had all these things growing up that I knew because that's how we were raised. We were always connected to spirituality, and the
sure.
ashram itself had their own meditation practices and initiations and things like that. So that was always part of my life. But then as a teenager, if it's part of your life and it's just handed to you, I think you don't value it until you have
Sure.
to get to it yourself. So,
The crazy thing is, you're one of the few yoga teachers who have that
mhm,
background because a lot
mhm.
of people just get into yoga
Yeah,
for health or yoga for stretching, yoga for peace of mind, yoga for lower back pain. And so to have that spiritual paradigm is probably why you're a great teacher too, I
I
think.
appreciate that. Well, yeah, so I met Dharma, and then and it's so funny too because I was vegan, vegetarian my whole life, but then I was vegan at that time. And same as you, I was like, the Lower East Side is the best. They have all the best restaurants, this
Yeah,
and that. And so that was kind of history. I feel like everybody who's probably mid to late 30s till their 70s studied with Dharma Mitra at some point if you lived in New York City. He was
sure.
like one of the main, it was him, Jivamukti. Uh,
Well, Sharon and David
yeah,
studied next to me at Dharma Mitra's.
right under
That's how
him.
I knew Sharon and David.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy. But yeah, I just wanted to know more about what you were saying. Was it in Pennsylvania that you met your teacher, like your guru?
I guess every tradition's a little bit different. So we have both our Diksha Guru, the one who gives you actually the
The
mantra.
blessing. Hmm.
Yeah, the blessing, the mantra.
Hmm.
And they're generally some type of weighty person in your life, like in a wonderful way. And then there's also Shiksha Gurus, people who give you instructions, people that you trust.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it was in India that I met my Diksha Guru. And then strangely enough, back in America in the mid 90s, I met Radhanath Swami, who's been a big player
Hmm.
in my life as a Shiksha guru. And so, yeah, I've got a handful of teachers that really sort of touch my heart and inspire me that I go to. It's like almost like having a spiritual therapist when you're like at a fork in your road. You're like,
Hmm.
Guru Maharaj, what do you think of this? I think this. What do you think of this? And it's just like, we're missing a time where oftentimes we don't have elders in our life. Oftentimes we grow up in broken families or we grow up where
Hmm.
we have to parent our parents. And so to have like a spiritual mentor or just people that you can trust that have no selfish interest, but they just care about you because that's their business is just caring about people.
Yeah.
It's a very
Yeah.
beautiful thing. I feel very grateful for having that in my life since I was 22 years old and I'm 59 years old right now.
Wow. So I'll tell you a funny story actually. Why I wanted to get in touch with you again as well is because remember how I messaged you randomly for a Vedic astrologer maybe
Yeah.
maybe even a year ago. And so I ended up
Yeah.
finding a few people. I saw two different readers, and one of them was like, for this remedy, for this issue in your life, you should go to a Krishna temple and meditate. And then this will help alleviate, whatever things are going on and
Huh.
whatever yogas you have and dashas in your chart. So I was like, okay. So I was like, let me find my local Hare Krishna temple. And I did. And so I walked in and, did the kirtan, the class, had the first shot after, and everybody knew you. And how I knew that I didn't know you were actually a Hare Krishna monk until I hear all the chants. And I was like, I know these chants. I
I
know
know all
these
this
chants
stuff.
from Raghunath's class. He like that's all the prayer in the beginning before you teach your
Right.
kirtan, everything was the same. And I was like, oh, I know all this. Like, how do I know this? And I was like, oh, I didn't put two and two together until that moment recently, which is I can't even tell you very recently that I heard all that. And then I was like, oh my gosh, he was a Hare Krishna monk.
All coming together.
Yes, like Jay Shetty, right? Like I didn't know. And everybody knew who you were because you do a lot of really good work for your movement with your podcast, because you have a podcast, a daily
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's why we are here. So then I started learning and studying a little bit more the Bhagavad Gita. When I was in college, I studied the Bhagavad Gita with actually Edward Bryant, who is like a
Edwin
big,
Bryant.
yeah, big teacher.
Edwin Bryant's also a Hare Krishna. Got news for you.
What? That is
Surprise.
correct. What?
That's
He
how
was
I
my
know him.
teacher for like 4 months.
That's how I know him.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. How did I not know that? He doesn't advertise that. He
Yeah,
was
it
just
was
a
like me. It's
professor.
like it's our thing. We don't necessarily
Okay,
advertise it, but
that's so funny.
if
So
you were to
he,
ask him, he'll say, "Yep, I'm Hare Krishna."
wow. So I haven't really gotten into the Bhagavad Gita for a long time until recently when I went there and one of the monks gave me a Gita, the one that you're talking about. And so I started studying that, reading some of that. And that's why I really wanted to have you on to talk about the Gita and to talk about Krishna in particular, because I mean, you're a yogi, but then you're also a Hare Krishna, you were a Hare Krishna monk. And the two are different, but they do intersect, but they're
Mm,
very different philosophically. I think like yoga and its beliefs on how we can get to self-realization is one way, and then Hare Krishnas and their belief is like it's really all through bhakti. So can you just share a little bit about your personal beliefs through all of your experience as a yogi and as a Hare Krishna monk? What your real beliefs are on like for you personally and just people in general on how they can really find God within and start to become more self-realized.
sure, and that's exactly the conversation Krishna has with Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Matter of fact, you're like asking like Arjuna's asking, and Krishna presents different ways, and he says, "Yeah, you can just renounce everything, and you can go inside, and you can become celibate, and you can." Focus your mind on the super soul within, and you can isolate yourself from your friends and your family and your relationships. Um, but Arjuna complained. He says, "This is very difficult to do. It's
Mm,
like controlling my mind and my senses. It's like controlling the wind." And Krishna agreed. It is. It's very difficult. And he said, Arjuna, you're by nature a warrior. You will look for a fight because you are one of these guys who just want to protect people.
mm,
So, so Arjuna, the circumstance was Arjuna was trying to get out of the war because he's like, why do I'm going into war? This isn't a good thing. I should just sit and meditate. And Krishna was just sort of poking at him and saying, are you kidding? You're going to go into a cave and meditate? Give me a break.
mhm,
You're going to lose your mind in that cave
mhm,
because you are met. And this is, I'm not recommending war,
mhm,
but you can just see it in my situation. For me to give up music, which is what I initially did, I'm just going to give up music and become a monk. I'm just going
mhm,
to give up what I do good and just become a monk and isolate myself from people and go inside and live on a farm. And then I was like, that's not what Arjuna did. Arjuna went and fought. What is my fighting? My fighting is to do what I do great, but do it in a spiritualized way.
mhm,
And that's what we were saying early. So that action in the world is called karma yoga. working in the world. And then as you refine karma yoga, they call it karma mishra bhakti. It's karma mixed with bhakti, meaning you're not just working in the world, you're working. Yoga means the connection. So I'm working in the world and I'm giving up the fruits of the work, which is money to God or something.
Mm-hmm.
But karma mishra bhakti, it's like I'm really dialing it in to devotion to God or devote whatever you want to call God. We call in our tradition we call God Krishna, but people
Mm-hmm.
call God Source, or people call God Ram, or people call God Jesus, or whatever you want to call God. And ultimately, we want this. We are working in the world, doing what we do great, but realizing like even these talents are not mine. And
Mm.
therefore, everything just belongs to God. All my work, all my thoughts, And so, even though we say things like there's so many different paths, if you look at the Yoga Sutras and the sutra, and Dr. Edward Bryant will also, say this, that this principle in the Yoga Sutras can be traced back to bhakti of Ishvara Pranani Dan.
Yeah.
You you dan is where we get this English word donate. We dan.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in India, little kids will say dan, like give me money. Say dan your pran. You donate your very life air, your prana, to Ishvara. Ishvara means the supreme
God.
controller.
Mm-hmm.
Ishvara is another way to say God.
Mm-hmm.
So all of your life air you give to God. Your very life breath is a donation to God.
Mm-hmm.
That's the perfection of yoga. Your work in the world, your thoughts, your
Mm-hmm.
talents, your heart. So that means when you're cooking or when you're cleaning or when you the way you're raising your children, the way you don't have to isolate yourself. Oftentimes when people isolate themselves, and I've seen this happen before, people are like, I'm sick of the world, I'm sick of working in the world, I'm sick of my girlfriend, or I'm sick of my boyfriend, I'm sick of my husband, I'm sick of my wife, I'm sick of my kids, and they buy a tiny home, buy some land, get dig a well, and they live off into the world. And unfortunately, their mind travels with them.
Mm-hmm.
They've never learned how to control their mind. They never learned a meditational practice, how to control their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why bhakti is a recommended practice for this age, because isolation most likely doesn't work.
Mm.
And because we're actually individuals, and individuals get lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Individuals like the company of other people. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean we're going to have to be gregarious all the time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's created a lot of inner space for me, a lot of private space for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a triple E extrovert,
I know.
but that being said, I can really find some special quiet time now. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not just quiet time with my phone or quiet time with music. It's just quiet time with God. And that's
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not saying we will never have quiet time, but we're working in the world and we're doing some mental modifications of how we think about other people. And I find a lot of my work is really mental modifications to train myself. Because in Bhakti, we train ourselves not just to see me and God or me and Source or me and Krishna. We
Mm-hmm.
train ourselves to see Krishna or God in every living being.
Mm-hmm.
See, my material mind sees that
Me and
I
mine.
like, yeah, me, God, and these are some of my friends, and I like Kat. She's pretty cool because she's sort of like me. But there's this person over there. There's Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I hate them or hate one of them. And then there's the other people. I hate them. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's people. These people are sort of cool. And there's my friend from high school. I like him. But there's that jerk from high school. I hate her. So it's like we have a world of friends and enemies.
Mm-hmm.
The Bhagavad Gita says that's got to end. That concept has to end. You have to learn to see divinity in every living being. It's no longer the metric for your spirituality to say, it's me and God and screw the world. A better metric for our spirituality is, can I see God in every person and every situation that God puts me in?
Mm-hmm.
That's a better way to measure how spiritually connected I am. Can I be God conscious with a person that's driving me insane? Can I see some good in them? Can
Mm-hmm.
I see something divine in them? Can I overlook their shortcomings? And let's face it, if you really feel they're doing problems in the world, A better way to persuade someone to change is not by hating them.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, you might shame them into changing. That doesn't change the person's heart. To really change a person or persuade a person, you have to love them, right? That's what a good parent knows. That's what a good friend knows. That's what a good teacher knows. That's what a good guru knows. That's
Mm-hmm.
what a good lover knows.
Mm-hmm.
You change through love. You don't change through hate.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world where we're hating right now, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not changing anyone. People are just digging in their heels. You hate me, I hate you. That's the game we're playing,
Mm-hmm.
and no one wins. We're just becoming more hateful.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I think you said a lot. I know,
And
I loved it. I think, well, it was funny because I was thinking, oh wow, he's talking just about like the yamas and the niyamas, the last niyama, Ishvara Pranihana. I was like, and then you literally said it. So I was like, okay, I could see the intersection. And I do love what you're saying. I think what can be challenging for some is the concept of bhakti, let's say, compared to meditation. Because I'm a very firm believer in meditation. I also totally understand what you're saying. And at 14, when I learned it, was I even remotely capable of like sitting still for 10 minutes to do that? No. Now, decades later, it's very much a complementary practice that is like necessary in my life.
sure.
And I know within the yoga system, that's so integral. Like that is the end of the limbs. Like that is where we're heading. It's like dharana, dhyana, all of that. So how does that overlay with bhakti? And in particular, is it because I think a lot of people, when they think of bhakti, they sometimes can just think of service, like,
Sure.
service, surrender. Um, and maybe that path doesn't resonate with everyone.
Well, great question. Service and surrender are going to happen whether we serve God
Mm,
or we serve our child or serve our boss or serve our pet. Service
right.
and surrender is happening 24/7,
Mm.
whether we like it or not. It doesn't sound good because surrender sounds like I'm surrounded by a SWAT team right now, and I surrender.
Yeah.
But surrender in bhakti is something very sweet.
Hmm.
I don't like even the word surrender so much. It's more like falling in love,
Mm.
falling in love and feeling loving reciprocation with that love. But the idea of, see, I feel all these paths go hand in hand. The
Hmm.
concept of Buddhist mindfulness,
Yes,
the
yes.
concept of meditation, and bhakti just takes it to this other level of, well, what are we mindful of? Are we mindful of, because you can be mindful also, and it's better than being reckless, just like I do martial arts. So if
Right.
I'm fighting, I'm not fighting like a thug or like just recklessly scrapping with someone. Everything has to be thoughtful and
Hmm.
very mindful.
Hmm.
A trained martial artist is incredibly mindful.
Hmm.
At the same time, what's the point of mindfulness? Like, what's the end game of mindfulness? Is it just to be mindful? And so, and with the classical kind of what we call dhyan, which is where the Japanese get the word Zen from. Zen is from the word dhyan, is how a Japanese would say dhyan. It was Zen.
Mm.
That is meditation. But are we just meditating? What are we meditating on?
Hmm.
And so the yogis, they say meditate on param atma, not the atma or the jiva, which is this what a Judeo-Christian culture would call the soul,
Hmm.
but God in the heart,
Hmm.
which appears as described both in Upanishads and the Puranas as a four-armed version of Vishnu. So
Mm.
there is meditation on form.
Hmm.
It's not just emptying the mind to get to nothing, although that is beneficial because the mind is busy.
Hmm.
And so just breathing is useful. Just breathing can soften our. We are so wound up in Kali Yuga, this age that we live in. We are so wound up. We
Yeah.
are so tied down. We are so broken. We are so much in anxiety. We are so much in fear. We are so much in overwhelm. Just for someone to say, okay, before we start our asana class, we're going to take 3 deep breaths. And you're like, what? and where our minds are blown. And
Right,
so when
right.
someone says, take 100 deep breaths, we're like, what? Then someone says, take 100 deep breaths, but don't think of anything. And you're like, what? And each time it's like upping the ante. So now we're
Hmm.
saying, here's form.
Hmm.
Not just empty your mind,
Hmm.
but be mindful of form. And let me explain to you what the form looks like.
Hmm.
It's there's actual clues of what we can zero in on, and that type of meditation can also go hand in hand with bhakti, where we see God within the heart, but not as just mere light, but the source of that light. In the same way, there's light in my window, but that light is also coming from a globe, from
Hmm.
the sun globe.
Hmm.
So you can't separate the light from the globe. They're interconnected,
Hmm.
you know. So in bhakti, we're just seeing, yeah, there's light, but the source of that light is coming from Bhagawan or Ishvara or Krishna, whatever you want to call the. And
Hmm.
also in all the traditions, in bhakti, we also hear of a feminine aspect as well as a masculine aspect. There's Radha Krishna, Sita Ram, Shiva Parvati,
Hmm.
Lakshmi Vishnu.
Hmm.
So depending on your yoga lineage or here you hear this from, you'll get different final. See, for most people taking yoga, they're not even asking these questions. They're just going, okay, when do I breathe? How do you do chaturanga?
Right.
Am I pinching my lower back here? What you're learning is a very refined type of physical therapy.
Westernized yoga.
A very westernized. And when
Yes.
you take an anatomy course, it's not even Eastern anatomy, it's Western anatomy
Right.
just overlaid on top of a system. Eastern anatomy, you're talking about marma points that you can't even see. That wouldn't even make it to a
Chakras.
textbook.
Yeah.
Yantras or
Yeah.
Kundalini
The
or the
nadis.
Sushumna Nadi and
Yeah.
stuff like that. That's anatomy for yogis.
Yes.
That's left out of teacher trainings. That's left out of
I
what
agree.
people understand are the koshas or the layers of the bodies.
Hmm.
So when we talk about these questions, and when you go to India too, when you hear from different masters of traditions, everything in one sense externally looks the same.
Hmm.
Just but they wear a dhoti and the women wear a sari, or they wear a Punjabi outfit, or they have a Brahmin thread, or they have a beard, or they have markings on their forehead.
Hmm.
Externally, it looks the same. But if you ask them where their end goal is, what is their siddhanta, what's the final conclusion of their teachings? If they actually understand that, because some people you get a yoga teacher who may not understand that,
Hmm.
then you'll understand what you're pining towards, where you're working towards,
Hmm.
you know? And so I got into asana at first with this concept of light. And then as I got and then as Paramatma or the super soul, and then
Hmm.
more I got into Bhakti, I realized like, oh, there's even the source of the super soul, and that's very interesting. That's in the book that's explained in the first canto, which is the first volume of the book that I do my podcast on, and that book's called the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they say that keep using this Judeo-Christian word, God, but whatever you want to call God, God has three facets
Hmm.
and can be understood in three facets. One is called Bhagavan, uh, meaning a form. The other one is Param Atma, means not the Atma, not the soul, but the supreme soul. So that's God manifesting into practically speaking, unlimited tiny pieces that enter into each body, not just human bodies, even
Hmm.
into the bodies of animals or plants or trees. So everybody, and that's why there's this concept of ahimsa, or
Hmm.
while you're on this planet, minimize pain because God is in everyone.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then so that's the two forms. God is form, God is a source, like a fountainhead of form. And then he breaks into practically unlimited little mini forms and enters into every species. From the smallest species you could ever think of to redwood trees to humans to higher beings that we can't perceive of,
Hmm.
what they call devas or devis.
Hmm.
Sorry if this is getting too esoteric.
I love
Form is
it.
and the third facet of God is light, or God is everything, or God is what the Sanskrit word is, Brahman.
Hmm.
And Brahman means you, me, but it also means this desk. It also means this tree. It also means the stars in the sky and all the planets, that God is ultimately everything. So, which one is right? They're all right.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, for example, right now I'm in my house,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you could also say, you could also be up in my bedroom and say, well, no, wait, this is your house. Or
Mm-hmm.
you could be on Google Earth and pointing down, no, that's your house.
Mm-hmm.
And I could say, no, Kat, you don't understand that. The house has a computer here. It has a living room here. And you could say, well, the bedroom, you got a bed in your house. I don't see a bed in your living. I was like, yeah, it's a different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So depending on your vantage point,
Mm-hmm.
each facet of my house looks different.
Mm-hmm.
Each one is correct, but they're just seen from a different vantage point. So God, they say, or what we call God, is true from three vantage points. This Bhagavan vantage point, where God is a being, and they say, or God is a localized, God is Paramatma, or God is everything, Brahman. And these three vantage points are, according to the different yoga lineages, will teach one of these vantage points. And within those vantage points, and they'll have a lot of common denominators. Also, we'll go through each yoga school. We'll have a lot of common denominators.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, this was the one that really resonated with my heart.
Mm.
And that's why I got serious about my bhakti path.
How does that relate to the Trimurti, like the generator, operator, destroyer, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, that
Sure.
version of?
Well, that version fits in every version also,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because Vishnu is source. That's
Mm-hmm.
how you'd say Bhagavan.
Mm-hmm.
And within this world, because Vishnu also enters into this world as well. Um, uh, I like your questions, but it's like a whole podcast on these questions. And within this world, you have, the generating source,
Mm-hmm.
and that source is Brahma, and Brahma comes from Vishnu's navel, just like
Mm-hmm.
we do that pose. What's it called? What's that pose called?
Peacock pose? Mayurasana?
No, the belly button. What's the? I can't remember now.
What are you talking about?
There's a pose named after this. I can't remember right now. But anyway, Brahma comes from. They say that Brahma comes from this lotus flower growing off the belly button of Lord Vishnu,
Mm.
and Brahma is the first jiva,
Mm-hmm.
and the first jiva means the first living being,
Mm-hmm.
and he creates the universe. He even creates Shiva from his forehead, from his third eye. And
Mm.
then so Shiva is the destroyer of the universe. And
Yes.
the whole material realm wraps up. Vishnu is the maintainer of the universe. And it
Mm-hmm.
all wraps up, and it goes back into the Mahavishnu, which is the inhale of Lord Vishnu. There's because Vishnu it breaks down, because Vishnu actually breaks into three different parts himself.
Mm.
And so the entire cosmos of the material realm enter into Lord Vishnu, and then the whole thing starts again. In the same way, when you inhale and you exhale, it's like it's just like a moment in time. So time is
Mm-hmm.
all relative, and the, they say that four of the yuga cycles together make up one
Kalpa.
day of Lord Brahma. One kalpa, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
one day of Lord Brahma,
Mm-hmm.
and one. Actually, no, 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 no. Four yuga cycles together make one day of Lord Brahma. Four yuga cycles together make one night of Lord Brahma.
Mm.
Lord Brahma lives 365 days a year and years. That is one, I guess, kalpa. That's an inhale, and then the universe ends,
Mm.
and then Lord Vishnu inhales,
Mm-hmm.
and so Lord Vishnu also, I think, is there for 100 years in his time, and that all together, then the universe wraps up, and then the whole thing starts again. And this inhaling and exhaling goes on forever, in the same way it goes on with us. In the same way, you can see a fly that lives a complete life, but only lives for a day or a
Right.
week. So
Right.
everything is sort of relative in the material universe, and our spiritual life is to recognizing that, man, I got to really zoom out if I really want to understand my world. Because
Absolutely.
yeah, anyway, if you think that's quite a fantastic, some people will listen to this story and say that is a very fantastic creation story. Well, if you think that's a very fantastic creation story, wait till you hear this one. Everything in this world, every form, every variety, every tree, every peacock, every human, every dog, hills, mountains, trees, or the milk, orange juice, everything came from nothing. That's
Hmm.
what material science teaches. That's the most fantastic of the creation myths ever. That all variety comes from nothing.
Hmm.
That's the and is a consciousness is just fabricated in the brain. And we see now through quantum physics, quantum mechanics, that there it is a multidimensional universe. There's a whole new fleet of scientists who are like, you know what? It's time for paradigm shifts, and we are in the midst of it right now. The world is changing rapidly.
Hmm.
I mean, like I said, when I got into all this stuff in the 80s, 30 almost 40 years ago,
Hmm.
veganism or vegetarianism wasn't even in the conversation. You were a weirdo. Yoga was for weirdos. Consciousness, even the talk of consciousness was for weirdos.
Hmm.
And now these things are actually in the conversation. We find that people are trying to understand these things. Lately, I'm listening to these guy was just on this lady that was just on Rich Roll.
I saw that, the psychic, because you're
The
talking about psychic.
telap tele how do you say it, Mary?
Telepathy, telepathy.
Telepathy, telepathy tapes
Yes,
about it's
yes.
such an interesting thing, and it's all about, oh my God, we have to rethink consciousness,
Mm.
and a lot of these scientists have to rethink, or it's time for paradigm shifts, and paradigm shifts happen historically every 50 years, every 10 years, every 100 years.
Hmm.
But all you got to do is look at World Book Encyclopedia from 1968
Hmm.
and see how much of this stuff is outdated.
Yeah.
And we teach speculation as fact. And we are not, and we're just too proud to say, you know what? We were wrong. We used to think this, but now we know this. How about
Right.
we don't know? And we're just feeling around in the dark. And maybe we'll never know. And that's a beautiful thing about studying Vedic teachings. They say, actually, this stuff we're talking about, you can't know. Why? Because your senses are limited. There's certain things that you will never see. There's certain things like a dog can't see red. He'll never see it. No matter what you do to the dog, no matter how you explain red to he just can't see it because the lens of the eye of the dog can't see red.
Hmm.
There's certain things as humans we can't perceive. There's sounds we can't hear.
Yes.
There's colors or spectrums of light we can't see. It's just part of having a very limited
Hmm.
um, instruments on this body, and we can't have perfect knowledge with imperfect senses. So these yogic practices come down, they get disseminated, and a lot of the stuff makes sense,
Hmm.
and a lot of the stuff there is a leap of faith, but it's not this vast leap over the ocean. They are very reasonable things that will make sense. And then we have to keep moving forward and say, you know what? I don't fully understand this, but I'm going to take a tiny step forward. And that's how faith develops. It's not this faith based religion, it is
Hmm.
experience based practice.
Yes.
It's experience based. And we know that as soon as you start practicing yoga and doing some of the foundational things like breathing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a firm believer. I know some people say that it's just not, there's certain things not achievable in this lifetime. But I mean, one of my favorite Swamis is Swami Vivekananda. I read his books
Mm,
religiously. And I mean, he talks about all these different states of nirvana that are achievable within our human form. If we go within, we do everything that you're saying, we practice, we have
mm.
the dedication, the devotion. Um, but just circling back to what you were saying, I mean, I think physics is catching up, and I think quantum physics is what's going to change the game. Because, like what you were saying about the breath being one cycle, like right now our universe is expanding. That's proven. It's like by inches by every year. The whole solar system, the whole universal system is expanding. So we are in that, but we're just in that fractalized tiny human form where it seems so slow compared to the
Right.
magnificent huge form of the operator, the version of God that's doing that.
And The spiritual path will, we'll say, you know what, once you get into our spiritual path,
Yeah, yeah.
you'll have less anxiety in your life. In one sense, it's true because you stop identifying with you as the controller, with the owner, that you possess. Real spirituality teaches that not that all this abundance and I want to be abundant, I want to be rich. That's sort of like materialistic spirituality. The real
Right.
thing is that nothing is ours. We can't keep anything. We came into this world with nothing. You don't own your children. You don't own your spouse. You don't even own your body, what to speak of your car and your career. Don't be devastated if you lose your job or you lose your car or you lose your house. It was not yours to begin with, and be prepared to invest in something else besides stocks and real estate. Invest in your identity underneath your body, underneath your mind. Invest in yourself as a spiritual being, or else you're going to be let down when you do come to the days of loss. And sometimes loss comes sooner than later. And it's
Mhm.
devastating unless we made some type of initial investment in ourselves as spiritual beings.
Yeah, and one of the last questions I want to ask you, well, there's one more, but one of the last questions I want to ask you is regarding fate and predestination.
Sure.
What does the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna consciousness, say about that? I know certain schools of thought, yoga philosophy, are like everything is predetermined, everything is predestined, there is absolutely no change. And then others say, well, we have free will. And so I'm just asking because you're saying essentially like none of it's ours. But what about the free will aspect?
That's a great question. In Vedic astrology, and isn't just within a bhakti path or Krishna consciousness. And
Hmm.
Vedic astrology says you have some karma laid out for you. You're
Yes.
dealing with karma. I've seen my Vedic charts done from 1990,
Mm,
and if you were to read them now, it'd read like my biography.
totally.
And,
100%.
and
Yeah.
you know that. And if you're
Yeah.
even people might be skeptical, but once you dip your foot into Vedic astrology a little, you'll realize, oh wow, this
Hmm.
is so right on. How can these people know this stuff about me?
Yeah.
But that being said, that is your karma. It's
Hmm.
coming from a previous life
Hmm.
and previous choices.
Hmm.
And um, we have some karma, but we also have free will. If we didn't, we'd be a slave to karma. And we have an opportunity to, a simple analogy would be this. One of my teachers said this to me when I first went to India, when I asked the same question. I said, what's the difference between karma and free will? And he
Mm.
said, well, you got to be careful walking on this street because sometimes a cow will come and gore you or gored you, what is it, whatever
Yeah.
it's called, whap you with his head and horns. He said, if you get hit by it, that's your karma. How you react to that cow, that's your free will.
Mm.
So we have this ability to react, and that's implicating us or freeing us from further karma.
Hmm.
It's giving us our good karma or our bad karma, and we have the opportunity right now. That being said, in Bhakti, they also say that God or Source or your higher power or Krishna is above karma.
Yes.
So in Bhakti, even if you had in Bhakti, even if you have some bad karma coming, that it gets minimized because God is higher than karma.
Hmm.
Karma is working under God's direction. God has outsourced cause and effect to the devas and devis, to the demigods, and it's not coming from God ultimately. And so sometimes if you see God just has our ultimate best interest in mind. So
Hmm.
sometimes if there are some very horrible things we struggle with, we turn that over to God. But sometimes if there's some good gift that we get, we just say, this is from God too, and I have to use it for God.
Hmm.
Or else we can get very much implicated in sometimes our good karma can ruin our life. I've seen that happen to many people.
Oh,
Real
yeah, yeah,
success.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
get.
they get intoxicated with their fame or their beauty or their strength or their power,
Mm-hmm.
and it ruins their life. They become jerks.
Hmm.
And sometimes destitution can ruin a person's life.
Hmm.
So our mood in bhakti is we just want to be of service and we want to be connected within that service. We want to serve humanity and we want to serve God. And whatever karma comes to us, we accept that's going to be for our purification. And I
Hmm.
find that's a great way to frame out life. Whatever is happening to me, whatever gets dealt with me, I'm going to just be tolerant, accept that that's what Krishna wants for me. Now, if I feel you're going through a hard time. That doesn't mean I should be like, well, it's just your karma, cat. Deal with it. No, we train ourselves to be very compassionate towards
Yeah.
others. But if
Yeah.
something happens to us, we think, you know what? That's my karma. I got to work through this karma. And how is this going to be bring me to a higher place? How can I be radically responsible for whatever I have?
Mm.
And it's a great mantra. It's like I'm responsible for what I have. I'm responsible for my future. I'm responsible for my life. When you say those on a regular basis, it changes your whole reality and gets you 100% out of victim mode, out of blaming mode, which ruins, devastates people's lives more than anything.
Yeah.
I blame the world for my shortcomings. I blame the world. I blame my father. I blame my mother. I blame my crazy uncle. I blame the president. I blame the government. I blame the USA. I blame my cut the crap for already. It gets old.
Yeah.
Take 100% responsibility for whatever, whether you, people don't even want to call it karma, whatever situation you're in,
Hmm.
and move forward in a positive way. Boom.
Love it. So, last question. Do you believe in enlightenment, that it's achievable in this lifetime? And what do you believe that that would look like or what it is?
Sure. Um, it's not that I just believe in it, it's promised.
Mm.
It's promised. And I have reasonable faith because the more I practice, the more imagine if I say, here's a stick, put it in the ground, and you are going to get a fig. Like, wait, there's no figs on this. There's no leaves on this thing.
Hmm.
Trust me, you just got to water it. You got to fertilize it. It will give a very delicious fruit. So I put it in the ground, and all of a sudden, a couple leaves grow. And I was like, oh, maybe she was right. And then all of a sudden, some flowers grow. I was like, oh, that's weird. She said a fruit was going to grow. I can't eat these flowers. Then all
Hmm.
of a sudden, I see a bee pollinate those flowers, and all of a sudden, there's a bud. I was like, all right, well, maybe that's the fruit. And then all of a sudden, the fruit grows, but it's not. I taste the fruit; it's not so good. And then eventually, so what is happening is blind faith would be say, okay, I just accept whatever a cat tells me. But reasonable faith is, well, I know Kat. She is not a liar. Two, she's a gardener, so she knows how these things work. Three, she's a friend. She's probably not lying to me. So, so what's called faith is generally starts off as reasonable faith.
Hmm.
Suppose suppose I'm your yoga teacher and I'm telling you all these things.
Hmm.
And you say, well, the guy does yoga pretty good. Maybe he knows what he's talking about. I saw him do a handstand in the center of the room. He seemed completely relaxed. And, so maybe I'll listen to what he says. He also says breathing's important while I do the handstand. Okay, I'm going to do what he says. He also says, actually, I should slow down my mind. He says kirtan has a bigger effect than the handstand does. That doesn't make sense, but so far, so good. And
Hmm.
this is how actual faith in Sanatan Dharma or this Eastern thought comes. It comes in small increments of things that you can perceive. Even though I couldn't perceive that fig at first from the bare root planting. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
so the yogis say enlightenment it is available, but you have to first want it and you have to go through the process and you can't jump over to higher steps. People want teach me the esoteric. Earn it. Earn it and show up on a regular basis. This isn't some like
Yes. Yes.
anti-anxiety medication. You just pop a pill and now I'm enlightened. People want a quick
Hmm.
fix. They want to take a drug, an herb, a mushroom, ayahuasca, a shaman. Just follow a simple practice.
Hmm.
It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to join a church or club or religion, even an ashram. Practice at home. Period. You know?
Absolutely.
So anyway, and what does it look like? You'll rid yourself of your selfish mentality. Your anxiety will minimize. You'll
Mm.
feel connected with everyone. You won't have enemies any longer. You won't be angry. And people will notice a change in your countenance. People will notice you'll bring light wherever you go. You'll radiate.
Love this. I remember your slogan back in the day was, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm something divine. You like sold it on bags and t-shirts and
Yeah, and that's the essence of all Sanatan Dharmic teachings. We're not a body.
yes.
right? Sometimes we think we're the body. We're like, we're check out my back bend or check out my handstand or check out this or
Hmm.
check out my abs. And people get oftentimes they join yoga for that.
Hmm.
And whatever it is, it's sort of like a teaser. It's all God bait ultimately because we're not a body. And if you think you're the body, you just get caught up in your ego.
Yes.
And it's not your mind too. And sometimes we think, well, no, it's my intellect or it's my cleverness or it's my charisma. It's not that either. And some
Hmm.
people, when you say you're not your mind, they're like, thank God, my mind is bothering me. It's haunting me. It's overwhelming me.
Hmm.
And that actually you're a divine being. You don't even, God is out there, but the God is also in your heart. You're also a divine being. You're also connected with God, whether we like it or not. In the same way, a fig leaf is connected to the fig tree.
Hmm.
Even when it's broken off from the tree, it has its initial connection with the roots of that tree.
Hmm.
So that same way, we're all connected, and we have to the goal of yoga. Not this isn't me talking. This is the yoga system talking.
Hmm.
Is Atmagyana, knowledge of the self. How is the self connected to source?
Yes. This is beautiful. Thank you so, so
Thanks.
much.
Great.
So you offer a lot of things. You go to India once a year, you have a farm, you do retreats, you have a new book, you have your own podcast where people can hear this kind of wisdom every day. So how can people find you and what are some of the things that you're offering?
Podcast is wisdom of the sages, and get it wherever you get podcasts, and it's a daily study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's sort of serious, but also very lighthearted and fun. We have a huge, wonderful community.
Hmm.
My book is called From Punk to Monk, and that you can get on Amazon. I also read it on Audible if you don't like to read books. My website is raghunath.yoga, and that is raghunath.yoga. And that has all my offerings I do at the farm.
Hmm.
Our farm offerings are on the website too. We two 2 hours from New York City or 2.5 hours from New York City,
Hmm.
2 hours from Boston, and then yeah, we do retreats. And I take people to India on
Hmm.
pilgrimage in autumn time. That's a super fun, adventurous trip around holy places in India. And then I do 200-hour and 300-hour trainings in India, and that's in January for about a month. And we also do a kirtan training that goes on. So yeah, it's a great life.
That is awesome. I
Thank you.
have to say your kirtan is my favorite. It's kind of
You're
like
very
going to a rock concert
thank you,
meets a Krishna consciousness.
thank
It's
you.
amazing.
So glad to connect, and congratulations with the podcast. Keep up with the good work.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate everything that you shared. I think it was really helpful for everyone.
Thanks so much, Kat.
So, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. I always love talking with Raghunath. He has so much wisdom, and he's a really great storyteller, too. So, if you like hearing some of the ancient Vedic stories and the ancient Hindu stories, he is like an encyclopedia for that. And I would highly recommend tuning into his podcast and his show for that. I always love listening to him share all those stories. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the Soul Awakening podcast. When you subscribe, you'll be notified of our new interviews that release every Friday, once a week. You can find the shows everywhere that podcasts are found on catfowler.com. And you can now watch the shows on YouTube and on Spotify, which is fun. And then you can listen to them everywhere else. And please don't forget to leave a comment or a review while you're there. If you love the information that you heard today and it sparks something in you, feel free to share this with your friends and your family as well as any aspiring yoginis or yoga teachers or yogis in your life or anyone that you know like is very into Eastern philosophy. We do talk quite a bit about that today, and I hope that that will help them on their path. So I'm your host, Kat Fowler. Thank you so much again for listening, and I'm wishing you lots of peace, love, and success on your spiritual path and journey. And hopefully, these podcasts every week are helping you with that in some capacity. So, I will see you on the next episode.